It's a deload week, which makes this the perfect opportunity to take a crack at a 5K time trial. As you can probably guess from the title, this is going to be a sub 18 attempt. Hey guys, if you're new here, my name is Eric. I'm a hobbyist runner from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, with aspirations of running in the Boston Marathon. For some context, back in December, I took 2 attempts at sub 18 and both didn't really go to plan, ending with a 3-second PB at 18:27. Despite some very solid training, I botched the prep pretty hard. I didn't sleep well, I didn't eat well, and then I ran in some very cold and windy conditions, leading to this underperformance. I was pretty bummed out about it, and after attempt number 2, I had this to say on the track.
So PB of 4 seconds. Yeah, not what I was really looking for here today, but given the wind and how I'm dressed, that kind of hampered me quite a bit. I think if I just stick to the training for a little bit, wait till it warms up, try this again during maybe early summer, late spring, see how we shake out. Might be able to take it.
And it's spring right now, so it's time to make good on that promise. Or so I hope, because I'm not really in peak form just yet, but I'm coming off the back of a sub 3-hour marathon with what I would consider to be a near perfect training block. And the 5K, despite being really ripping fast, is still mostly an aerobic event, so hopefully I still have a really good shot at going sub 18. In terms of more specific training though, I've ramped back up to 115K per week and I have 3 VO2 max sessions under my belt, the longest of which is 8x800 meters, although this is going to be on the week of the time trial itself, so those gains won't be there for my attempt. But mentally, this session will be a very good confidence booster if it goes well. So, how did it go?
It actually feels perfect today. 11 Celsius, bit of sun, bit of a north wind. Nothing like last time, so should be a good day. Let's get on with it. All right, back here for another bleacher report. Hopefully you can hear me over these birds, and I got a squirrel just watching me over there. What's up, little buddy? Felt a little bit undercooked, but at the same time, when I tried to just push the gas and go even faster, it felt like I was overcooking it. So yeah, I'm really not sure if that was a good session or not. So in light of that, I'm debating what pace I should go out for this 5K time trial. The weird thing is, both predictors are kind of agreeing. So Garmin, which is finally I think dialed in to my paces, says I can do this in 17:54. I think Strava says 17:59. So I'm thinking of just full sending it, trying to pull off a light negative split just to inch under that sub 18. All right, I think groundskeeper's here, so we gotta get going.
So we're going full send, but full sending it where? As I mentioned in my previous video, I'm gonna be doing this on the paved path around my local cricket pitch instead of my local track. Why? Well, the track that I usually run on is made of dirt mostly, but there is also gravel, which means I'm not getting the best traction when I'm out here.
Whenever I'm running, yeah, I kind of slide back. That's kind of what's happening. So I could be anywhere between 2 to 4 seconds slower per kilometer on here versus out there on the roads. Then again, I've never tested it, so.
And the thing about the good track that I feature in my videos sometimes is that this track actually belongs to a very athletic high school, and I'm almost certain there will be student runners out there, so I really don't want to get in their way. And that's where the cricket pitch comes in. Strava says it's 450 meters in circumference, meaning the radius is 71 meters. In terms of curvature, that is nearly double that of the curved part of a running track, so it should be barely noticeable when you're going around it. It's a very good candidate for a time trial, but here's the thing, I don't trust this 450 meter measurement, so I'm gonna do it myself.
Okay, small problem. There's a cricket game in progress right now. I did not expect this. Hopefully no one really gives me a hard time about it. It is public property, but it is gonna be weird seeing a dude with a measuring wheel, a chalk, and a camera, so we're gonna have to play it by ear.
All right, so that's the start line. Start measuring this thing. I'm gonna try to take the inside track as much as possible. Jeez, it is actually kind of hot today. Yeah, it's not gonna be a perfect measurement, but it'll be close enough to the point where I can say without a reasonable doubt. Okay, Okay, so looks like Strava was correct. 450 meters basically on the dot. There's like 35 additional centimeters, but honestly, who cares? Times 10, 4,500 meters. Additional lap, that's 4,950. And then, so I need to walk 50 meters that way. All right, let's go. Okay, slowly. 80 more centimeters. God, oh, it's like 5 centimeters. Okay, right there, that is 500. All right, I'm gonna mark this with the red road chalk. This has gotten so messy, like it's not even funny. This stuff is not long for this world. It's not forecast to rain, so should stick around. Okay, that's 5K.
And with that, it was time to put the final touches on my prep for the time trial. The 2 days between the time trial and my last session had 2 easy runs, 13K apiece. Nothing overkill, just trying to keep the legs turning over. I had a pretty good pass to dinner and bottle of Powerade the night before. I figured because this is a 5K and not a marathon, there's no real need to carb load. If anything, that'd be detrimental because of the extra water weight. The weather was more or less bang on at 13 degrees actual and feels like 15. I know some folks might prefer chillier temps, but I know for me that if I go below 13, my nose starts to run, which isn't great as I found out in December. I breathe through both my nose and my mouth for hard efforts. And more importantly, it was basically a windless day, which I don't think I've ever had. The warm-up was an easy 3K jog with 2 400-meter repeats at about threshold, and then it was time to take a crack at sub 18. Now, despite what I said earlier, my pacing strategy going into this was to try to even split as much as possible, if not end up with a little bit of a positive split. I know negative splitting is always talked about, but I find for me, the 5K is ran so close to red line that leaving that much time left at the end just doesn't feel great. If it's a 10K or above, I have more wiggle room, but for the 5K, even or positive splits is my go-to. For the first kilometer, my number one priority was to try to keep the pace. I know in a lot of my past 5K PB attempts, I would always set off too fast, so I was really trying to rein things in, and this is kind of where my bad pacing always comes back to bite me. It's definitely something I have to work on this summer, and sure enough, the first K rang in at 3:32, a hair too fast, but the important distinction is this time I felt like I was in control rather than, just feeling desperate I have to go as fast as possible. My average heart rate for the split was 179, although that doesn't really tell the full story because of course it includes the heart rate from the time I'm ramping up. I was up and into the 180s, or roughly 90% of my max heart rate from the first minute onwards, and if we zoom out, my overall average was 191, or 94% of my maximum heart rate, which means I really left it all out there. The second K is when I started to feel more confident about pulling this whole thing off. By now, I had familiarized myself with the other users of this trail, who would dodge me, who I'd have to dodge myself, that sort of thing. And this kilometer clocked in at 3:33. I knew that wasn't great from the perspective of trying to save up for a final kick, but then again, I also knew, well, unless something catastrophic happened, my chances of pulling this off were really high, so I kept plugging away. The third K is when things start to slow down. For the first half, I noticed I was more or less bang on with goal pace, but for the second half, I was starting to flag a bit. Of course, this was caused by me going out too fast, but at the same time, the sun was really starting to come out now, and things were getting a lot more toasty. Logically, I knew that this wasn't going to make a huge difference in me hitting my goal or not, but emotionally, it felt like I was fighting a lot harder to keep pace, and sure enough, this K clocked in at 3:35, 2 seconds slower than the previous. The fourth K is when things started to really hurt. My body was not happy and it was really screaming at me to slow down, trying to shut things down, but here's the thing. That's the exact feeling you want for an all-out 5K. It's just something you have to get comfortable with in training, and on the day you have to be mentally strong and you have to be able to convince your body, hey, it's gonna be okay, it's just for however many minutes are left. It's also critically important to make sure you're still running with good form. I know when it starts hurting for me, I tend to put my head down, which is really not great for airflow. And while we're here, I guess we'll go over some of the cues that I like to personally use. The first is to look long. This keeps my head up and my airway unrestricted. The next is I check for tension throughout the body, and I know for me personally, it goes a lot to my shoulders. So just kind of like letting things hang and be loose. That's really good for running form. And in a similar vein, I like to imagine I'm holding potato chips in my hands just so they're not like balled up in the fists and super tense that way. And one of the most important ones is to imagine that my footsteps are landing behind me. Now, that is physically impossible, but what this cue does is it makes sure that your footsteps are landing right under your center of gravity instead of out into the front, which is of course gonna act as a brake. And with all those cues, I finished out the 4th kilometer and it pinged in at 3:37, which was a bit annoying to see because of course I was slowing down, but at the same time I knew I had 3:44 remaining, and I was well on pace to sub 18 unless something catastrophic happened. The final K, I was just holding on for dear life. My mouth was starting to water, which I'm told only happens if you're breathing really, really hard, and I definitely was. Usually I do a 2-2 breathing pattern for most hard efforts, but there were certainly some stretches where I was doing 2-1. This is the part of the 5K where I usually perk up realizing there's only a little bit more to go, but in this case, I was so buried by the fast start that I didn't really have much more pace to give. I looked at my watch and I knew from the time and distance fields, this was the final stretch. I passed the blue line, which in this context stands for 50 meters out, and I dumped everything I had left in those remaining 50 meters. But this is where the weird part happened. I cruised right past the finish line and my watch didn't go. My immediate thought was, oh no, the GPS screwed up. But by how much? Am I long or am I short? Unfortunately, I was so down in the trenches, I lost track of how many laps I'd done up until that point, but it felt like a 5K, so I thought, well, okay, screw it, we're just gonna keep running, and sure enough, another 50 meters later, the watch pinged and I stopped it. Here's my immediate post-run reaction.
Okay, just got done. Sorry if this audio is kind of rough. I'm in my car, which is not great, and I got AC blasting. Time on record, 17:52. When I stopped my watch though, it read 17:57. Take a second off there for me just realize like, oh, we're done. I'm gonna have to go back and dig into the GPS data, see what the hell happened. But yeah, it certainly felt like an all-out effort though, and it certainly felt like 5K, because it was a pain train. In terms of gut reaction, I am super happy with that result. This was the one I was going after in December of 2025. Got it done today, and everything was bang on. The weather was bang on. It felt great, got good sleep, had a good meal like last night before, popped a caffeinated gel 30-40 minutes before, and really that's all she wrote.
All right, what the hell happened with the GPS? It took a little bit of digging, but I exported the GPX from Garmin and imported it into Google Earth, where we can see a lot of the laps were ending up short. This makes sense because, well, I wear my watch on my left wrist and that wrist is on the inside track, so I think for some of this, the GPS wasn't super accurate and it thought I was running on the grass for parts of the run, which is perfectly understandable because GPS was designed for airplanes, not runners looking for meter by meter accuracy. What this practically means is I was actually running a bit faster than what the pace field on my watch was saying. Only 1% faster, mind you, but that's still something. To be perfectly clear though, I'm accepting 17:53 as the final time. It's 1% of additional time, but that's roughly in line with what would happen if there were a road 5K with other runners present anyway, so I'm more than happy to accept this result. However, if I'm allowed to cope for just 1 minute here and use my unofficial official measured endpoint at the 5K mark, then the time becomes something resembling 17:46. Now, why does this result matter? Well, if we take 17:53 and put into the VDOT calculator, we get a marathon time of 2:51:20. Now, there are two huge asterisks on that. The first is obviously 5K is usually not a super reliable indicator of overall marathon time. And the second is, it's going to take a while to do the training to extend that speed out to a full marathon distance. I'm reasonably confident that if I stick with the training and remain consistent, then well, Boston 2028 is a real possibility. Alright, so what's the next step? Well, I think the next step is going to be to make sure I can hit this 10K time from the VDOT calculator. A roughly 37-minute 10K sounds crazy intimidating, but You never know till you try, right? But that's a long ways away from now. If you want to see how I get on with the rest of my training, hit subscribe. Also, if you made it this far in the video, consider giving it a like. Best way to support the channel. And as always, thank you so much for watching.